After finishing our first exhibit, Keystone Wilds is off to a great start. Utilizing a natural barrier to not interrupt the view of the habitat, this enclosure is sure to be a hit with the guests and leave them with an incredible first impression of the zoo. Thankfully, our previous project, Keystone Park, was able to lend us one of their most popular residents for a very important project. Due to the giant anteater's current IUCN status rating them as vulnerable, we knew building a habitat for them at Keystone Park wasn't enough to save the species. Unfortunately, sometimes bringing awareness to an issue isn't enough, and action is required. In this sense, the action was starting Keystone Wilds off with its own giant anteater breeding and conservation program. In case you missed the last episode, we built our very first habitat at the new zoo, starring Bear the giant anteater, a longtime veteran of the series. If you're familiar with the aforementioned series, you should be familiar with Bear already, as he's been a well-loved member of Keystone Park for many years. Bear has been an absolute joy to work with so far at Keystone Wilds, and has luckily adjusted into his new home and larger habitat just fine. Bear is most likely not going to become a permanent member of Keystone Wilds, however, as his habitat at Keystone Park is to be left vacant until his return. This is a giant anteater breeding program, meaning, once Bear successfully completes his mission, he'll then return to his home at Keystone Park. As you probably know, a breeding program takes more than one animal to be successful, and if you didn't know that, just trust me and don't ask questions. Allow me to introduce you to Anteater. She was quietly introduced to the habitat behind the scenes to give Bear the proper time to adjust to his new living situation. Giant anteater are primarily solitary animals with the exception of a mother and her young. Neither Bear nor Anteater were used to living with another member of their species. Now, thankfully, both are well adjusted and introduced, and with time, hopefully we will be introduced to the newest member of their family. On another note, a majority of the starting facilities are in dire need of maintenance and repair, so effective immediately, we've brought on our first maintenance tech to Keystone Wilds. Hopefully these repairs aren't bank-breaking and are swiftly fixed. No matter how financially successful Keystone Park has been, starting a new zoo in the same brand is never cheap, especially since Keystone Wilds is hardly making any of its own money yet, other than the very generous donations of the members of Club Keystone. Without officially opening, the zoo simply isn't profitable. We need to ensure that once our doors open to the public, we can start to claw our way out of this debt. And luckily, with a cute and marketable baby anteater hopefully on the way soon, I think that I have just the right idea on how to accomplish this. One of the best and most profitable things to build right at the start of a zoo is a gift shop. Locating the shop right at the very front allows guests to visit both upon entry and exit, and if we can commission some top quality merchandise as soon as Keystone Wilds opens to the public, hopefully our financial situations will soon be in the past. Looking back at the Keystone Park financial records, our analysts have informed us that our gift shops comparatively underperformed when put against the rest of the zoo's income methods. As a result, we're going to have to find a creative way to get guests inside of the new shop. And aside from the top quality gifts and souvenirs themselves, I think we found just the right solution. If you'd like to further support the construction of Keystone Wilds and our latest expansions, then consider becoming a member of Club Keystone. The link is in the description below. Not only will you receive early access to videos, but you'll also get your name forever on the wall of donors. Thanks to all of our current members for the endless support. I truly couldn't do this without you. If you enjoyed today's video and the continuation of our newest adventure, consider subscribing. It's a great time since the series has just begun. Don't forget to like the video and leave a comment as well. By engaging with the video in any way, shape, or form, quite simply you're telling the YouTube algorithm to push the video out to more people so that they can see, and the more people that watch, the more videos I can make at a higher quality too. Don't forget to join the Discord server, the link is also in the description below, and be sure to stick around to the end of this video, I have some very exciting news. All I'll say right now is you may be able to further engage with the gift shop that we make today from home. Meet the Gibbon, the first primate to call Keystone Wilds home. Sadly, the IUCN lists them as endangered, with an estimated wild population of only 15 to 20,000 remaining. It doesn't look like they need much land requirement at all, only 230 square meters. However, they need 60 meters of climbing space, which is a lot. Our barriers this time around are also going to have to be climb-proof. Gibbons can escape quite easily. Unlike most primates, Gibbons are actually monogamous, which is quite interesting. If you don't know what that means, effectively they mate for life. This means Gibbons can form very tight-knit family units and take care of their offspring all the way through adulthood. Among ape species, surprisingly this is quite uncommon. Like most primates, Gibbons are exceptionally intelligent animals, needing a variety of habitat enrichment items to keep them entertained. This also extends to their climbing equipment, as they're one of the few species able to brachiate. We'll get into what that means later. Brachiation in the animal kingdom is surprisingly rare. However, the Bordean orangutan and the siamang are able to do it as well. However, despite this, there's not going to be any cohabitation found in this habitat today. We have a rather large plot of land to transform today. The Gibbon habitat is going to be right at the entrance of Keystone Wilds, with a path leading up to our brand new gift shop. Neither build is going to be particularly large, however, the Gibbon habitat is going to be reaching some very impressive vertical heights. In the wild, Gibbons spend a majority of their time living high up in the trees, and today it's our ultimate goal to give them ample space to be able to climb, swing, and play. As mentioned in the Zoopedia, gibbons are also able to brachiate, meaning they can climb on the underside of certain objects and materials. We're going to have to carefully position the climbing equipment in order for the guests to be able to get the best views possible. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves though. Before we can start building any climbing equipment, we first have to build an outline for the habitat and gift shop. Typically when I build, I try to stay away from the in-game barrier options, obviously except the null barrier. There are however some exceptions to this. I actually quite like using the pre-built glass piece because it perfectly maps the barrier of your habitat, but more importantly, it's watertight, and water can be difficult to work with in Planet Zoo. The reason why being watertight matters in this instance is that I want the front of the habitat to be a small pond so that the gibbons aren't going to be able to approach the front of the habitat, so they can't escape as easy. Once all of the glass was finally layered around the enclosure, I opened the terrain editor menu and put in some water. Surprisingly, I got the depth and everything correct on the very first try. This was a simple yet really important step because now we can plan the rest of the habitat around what we already built. Before moving on to any new steps, I always like to polish up and finalize what I've already built, and in this instance it was pretty easy. All we had to do is make sure our custom path aligned with the glass. It's the small steps and attention to detail like this that can truly make your zoo pop. The glass viewing is only going to be able to be seen at the front of the habitat, which leaves us 3 sides to where we have nothing. Habitat viewing doesn't matter at all from the remaining 3 sides. It's going to be such a tall enclosure that you'll be able to see it from anywhere, so I think we can cover up this hill with some foliage. To accomplish this, and make it cohesive with the Anteater habitat that's right next to it, we're going to be using the exact same European rustic stone wall pieces to build the planters. While cohesion and matching is incredibly important in a build, it's equally as important to make your build stand out in a different way. For example here, we're leaving some gaps in between the European stone walls to make room for some rocks. Surprisingly, that was the hard part. Planters are such a simple and fast way to spice up your zoo. Originally, to cover the gaps, I tried to use the faux rocks from the aquatic pack. However, in honesty, this was a bad idea. This area is supposed to look natural, and faux literally means fake. I then settled on the exact same rock palette we used to make the giant Anteater enclosure, the tropical rocks as well as the dynamic mossy. Once all of the rocks and European rustic walls were in place, I then came in with the mulch to make sure that there were no holes or gaps. The mulch blends the 2 terrain elevations together, but more importantly, allows us to place foliage on top. We'll get to the foliage later in the video, but for now, let's follow this path slightly up and start working on the outline of the gift shop. We'll get into the specifics on how to use both of these facilities later on in the video. Just know for now that so far, we've used a modular gift shop and some expanding tiles, as well as an exhibit. Starting off the gift shop, I added a layer of glass all along the front. Astute viewers may have noticed that I just covered the entrance, but don't worry, guests will still be able to walk through it. We'll place the door right here as well, because this door texture has glass already inside of it. Paired with the glass that we placed on the front of the building, you can't even tell that it's there, it looks perfectly natural. Now we can come in and reinforce the glass with some exterior walling. For the outside, I went with a very basic plaster, colored a drab tan. By using some relatively basic rectangles and squares, I was able to get a pretty interesting shape for the 3 windows up front. One thing that's incredibly important to remember in Sandbox games, and especially Planet Zoo, is that sometimes the plans have to change. For example, in this build, I wanted the gift shop originally to have more of a hexagon shape, utilizing these nice curved walls in the sides. Putting it simply, the idea wasn't cool enough to put the effort to make it work, and what we came up with instead was even better. I realize now that the west side of the gift shop intersects with the east side of the Gibbon enclosure, so we could put in some small viewing windows so that guests on the inside of the gift shops can see the gibbons in a hidden spot. Since terrain can't go over modular gift shop tiles, all we have to do is place some of the exact same mulch we used before to even out the terrain. Afterwards, I realized that the glass in the back of the gift shop didn't necessarily make much sense, because in my mind, this is where the staff checkout's gonna be. To fix it, I took some plaster of a slightly different shade and overlaid it on the glass. This adds a nice little bit of depth, and we can come in and detail it even more later. I was struggling for a while to figure out what I wanted to put on the outside, but then I realized we could extend the modular gift shop tiles out here and cover it up later. It's really basic, but overall I'm pretty happy with the shell of the gift shop, but in order to continue, we need to work on the outside. The look and feel of the gift shop is heavily connected to the habitat it shares space with, so before we continue construction on the gift shop, we're going to have to build up the gibbon habitat a little bit first. Let's start with the path. We've used this path trick in the past couple episodes, but in case you're new here, effectively what you have to do is use any flooring piece slightly above the path. The guests can still access it, but it makes the path look a lot more aesthetically pleasing. The trick is also really fast to implement, and if layered correctly, it goes right up to the buildings that you've constructed. Utilizing this trick really gives your builds a sense of scale, as the paths appear more like plazas where guests have multiple options to walk, when in reality, they're still bound to the path beneath. To get rid of the exposed modular gift shop tiles on the outside, all I did was layer some more limestone a little bit higher. From above you can't notice it whatsoever, and it makes the textures feel all the same. Now that the pathing was done, I came back over to the far left-hand side of the Gibbon enclosure and reused some different rock pieces from the various episodes. Before I could place more rocks down though, I had to build up the back end of the habitat so we knew exactly where to put them. I want this Gibbon enclosure to utilize a few different heights of terrain layers, so they have to use the climbing equipment to get from section to section. I first built up another retaining wall using the exact same European rustic stone walls, as well as the rock palette that we used before. To avoid any holes and to make the foliage come in a lot smoother later, I used another layer of mulch on the top. The difficulty started when trying to blend in the retaining wall of the interior of the habitat, because I don't want any of the European rustic stone wall to appear in the Gibbons enclosure. It's not natural. These rocks are likely to be covered by foliage later on in the build process. However, I wanted a visual indicator that I could personally see that differentiates the two layers of the habitat. This will make building a lot easier personally for me. The best part about it is, if any of the rocks do manage to peek through the foliage, it'll simply look like a cliff face. The retaining wall looks pretty good, and it's clearly differentiating the upper and lower portions of the habitat. Now that the height has been established, I say it's time to go back and work on the gift shop. The main thing that I'd like to accomplish now is throwing a roof on the gift shop. Thankfully we made it a square, which is by far the easiest shape to do this with. With the shadows coming in on the left side, I think a glass roof over the right side, which is also where the checkout is going to be really aesthetically pleasing. Naturally though, we couldn't just go and throw the roof on, that would be too easy. First we had to completely redesign the walls, lowering a panel of the plaster down to make the windows a little bit smaller. The first part of the roof was about as basic as you could possibly make it. All it is was 6 pieces of concrete on the grid. The next step was a little bit tricky, but nowhere near difficult. All we had to do now was take the exact same color plaster and pre-plane out the glass dome. I want the roof to come to a fine point and still remain geometrically sound. Therefore, I used these triangular pieces to make it a possibility. These are by far some of my favorite glass pieces to use in the entire game, but as you can see, building it on the grid didn't really work, so we're going to have to come in and separate it from the main group. After that, we can orientate it exactly how we want and make it line up with everything else just a little bit better. I used some more flat glass pieces to line up perfectly with the concrete. Now it's airtight. However, this isn't the only roof I was talking about. One of my favorite building tricks that I've learned over the course of Planet Zoo is that you can use the Indian fabric pieces and recolor them both to the exact same color, and it'll get rid of the weird designs on them. This makes them look a lot more like tarps than tapestries, and for the design of this build, that's exactly what we needed. Add in a few support beams, and now we have a really nice covered area for the employees that are working on the outside. It'll also save the merchandise from any inclement weather, like rain. At this point, the build was looking a little bit bland, and I really didn't like how the upper layer of windows looked, so I took a wallpaper piece and recolored it to match the texture and color of the plaster. I spread this new pattern all around, and it made the build look a lot more dynamic and interesting. Details are highly contagious, and once the upper windows were done, I decided to come back in with some trims on the lower ones. Like I said before, if you truly care and go the extra mile and add these little details that not everybody might notice, this is how you elevate the quality of your builds. You have to be willing to put in the time and effort to go the extra mile. While it's still relatively basic and under-detailed for my standard, I'm really happy with the facade of the building and how it's turning out so far. I am getting a little bit tired of working on it though. It takes a lot longer than it's portrayed in the videos. This alone just took a couple hours. Right now I think I'd rather work on the Gibbon habitat, and since we expertly blended the terrain into the mulch into the gift shop, I think we can accomplish it. This Gibbon habitat may appear not to be too large, however it's going to take a great amount of effort to do the foliage work with because it's going to have to be really thick. In essence, we don't want the Gibbons to be able to traverse over every inch of the habitat, and there's a trick to make sure that they don't. This is elephant grass, and it has a really large hitbox, meaning that animals can't actually walk through it, no matter the size. This also works when it's barely peeking over the ground. From here it just looks like normal grass or reeds if it's close to the water's edge. By utilizing this elephant grass in strategic locations around the habitat, we can theoretically manipulate where the Gibbons can and can't go, and we only want them to be able to use a small portion of the land, meaning we're going to be using a lot of elephant grass in this habitat. I started the foliage by placing elephant grass over the entire perimeter of the habitat, although a lot of it is unnoticeable, and it's going to be covered with other foliage later on in the process. Whenever there's a body of water of any size in a build, I always like to start a majority of the foliage there, because there's only a few ways you can detail a body of water. I always like to start with the underwater hydrilla plants. Once a majority of the larger foliage is in place, I'll then come in with some underwater eelgrass. This looks really nice on the bottom of the water. Wherever we didn't place any of the underwater eelgrass, I'll come in with some aquatic faux rocks that are colored to match the bottom of the pond. It's really important to make these gradually creep up the surface, because realistically speaking, sometimes the surface of the water is a bit lower and sometimes it's a bit higher. It depends on how hot it's been with a variety of other variables. We'll add a lot more in later, but I added some buffalo grass to the surface of the water on this side of the enclosure just to completely finalize it. Anything that limits the work we'll have to do later on is okay by my books. Some cattail reeds are also an absolute staple of any body of water. You just have to be very careful not to overuse them. Along with these mangrove trees, I especially like how the roots of the trees go right into the water. They add a really nice texture of wood that otherwise would be missing. I wasn't really liking how the elephant grass was looking, so I sunk some common reeds a little bit further into the ground and acted like it was elephant grass that was a little bit less old and matured. The only thing left now is the surface of the water, and there's realistically only one plant you can use in this instance. Just be really careful not to overdo it. Lily pads are best used in small quantities. The entire perimeter of the habitat is relatively completed, and I really like how it turned out. The retaining walls especially look really nice and finished. I don't think you can really beat the foliage work on the pond though. It's so simple yet so effective, but we still have a long way to go. I've already started the basics of the climbing structure, and truthfully, I wanted to do a little bit off camera just so I was confident in working with it. The job of this climbing structure is quite simple. Let the gibbons go from the high end of the terrain to the low end, and nothing more. Surprisingly, only one species of primate calls Keystone Park home, and it's the Colombian white-faced capuchin monkey, which is a fair bit similar to the gibbon in terms of what they require for their habitat. This time though, we're going to be taking things one step further, and a lot higher. The gibbon and siamang habitat at Disney's Animal Kingdom, which Keystone Wilds is directly inspired by, has these really interesting towers, and I'd like to replicate that. Thankfully, the foundation of the habitat was perfectly laid out to implement this. I've had this planned from the start. You're clearly going to be able to see these two towers before you even enter Keystone Wilds, which was the plan from the beginning. With a small bit of luck and a large bit of marketing, these are going to become two of the most iconic landmarks in the entire zoo. Now we just have to execute. For the base of the tower, which is the most important part because without a strong base the entire thing is going to come collapsing down, I decided to use these North African plaster pieces because they have a very interesting texture and aren't just plain cylinders. I colored everything a slightly different shade of gray to make it appear just like the tower that we're taking inspiration from. Once the color was set, I stacked them on top of each other until I got the tower to the exact height I wanted. Once the height was selected, I used this specific plaster piece in the exact same North African family and recolored it the same gray. I used this piece specifically because it's going to act as a great transition between the main base of the upper part of the tower as well as the base of the actual foundation. For the upper part of the tower, I used a much wider cylinder piece that's not very tall. The gibbons are actually going to be able to stand on this. Once it was in place, I copy and pasted the exact same piece and moved it slightly up. Now we have to connect the two. I connected two of the arched metal poles from the Zookeeper pack together to make this almost semicircle. I then periodically placed these all over the tower, making a cage of sorts. The tower actually came together a lot quicker than I expected it to, and I'm quite happy with the design. I think we nailed the inspiration perfectly. Luckily, the second tower was an easy duplication. All we had to do was make sure it was exactly even with the other one so we could use a straight rope. This is so the gibbon can brachiate from tower to tower. Now that the exhibit landmarks are in place, all we have to do is connect them up with themselves, as well as the climbing structure on the lower portion. The first step was certainly the easiest. Connecting the two towers was as simple as using the exact same rope piece 3 times. After that, to make sure the gibbons could actually get up to the towers, I made a vertical rope piece rotated 90 degrees and made it go all the way from the ground to the top of the tower. To further detail the build, I used a different rope that was curved at 2 meters to connect the two ropes together. This almost makes it look like a pulley system, and it's all one big part. After doing the same to the other side, I used a curved 4-meter rope piece to connect it to the climbing structure that we made off camera. Once both of the towers were completed and connected by the ropes so the gibbons could have access, I started working on a smaller climbing structure in the middle that they'll realistically probably use more. What I mean by this is when using the tower, the gibbons might glitch out a little bit. Climbing in Planet Zoo can be a bit finicky, but these are made with such simple pieces and such simple angles that the gibbons are bound to work perfectly on them. I wanted to include a slightly different element in the back climbing structure, so I ended up going with this natural rope bridge that's flexi-colored. I made it brown to fit in with the rest of the wood. I also took the base supports of this climbing structure and made them into trees so it fits in with the foliage that we'll add later. Lastly, I used some very small climbing logs that aren't actually going to be usable by the gibbons, just to act as some simple supports for the rope and the rest of the structure. It adds some realism. That took a lot longer than you probably think it did. Making a climbing structure is difficult because if you want to line everything up perfectly, it's quite tedious, but when the gibbons arrive soon, it's all going to be worth it. I just know it. From the bird's eye view of the tower though, I noticed that we're missing a lot of foliage in this habitat. The pond looks really nice, but the rest is quite bare. I think we should fix that. I'm quite happy with how the climbing structure looks, but it looks out of place without some foliage surrounding it, and we can fix that really easily. The first thing I did was use the faux rock step and color them the exact same hue as the tropical rocks. I used these so the staff would have access between the habitats, because obviously they're not going to be climbing on the gibbon structure. You can check the traversable area of animals as well as staff from the heat maps menu, and it looks like we are successful. Now that we knew exactly where we wanted the staff to go and where we want the gibbons not to go, we could place the rest of the elephant grass accordingly. Remember, this is to stop the gibbons from going to certain places of the habitat. I started placing some trees around the perimeter of the habitat next to the mangroves that were already placed by the water. I was very careful on what trees I selected because I didn't want any of them to reach higher than the towers. The towers are the defining landmark of this habitat, not the trees. I then used a heavy amount of creosote bushes around the rock perimeter so the gibbons couldn't get over. I was also careful to put some elephant grass underneath these, just in case they weren't enough. Now that all of the main and tall aspects of the build were in place, I used a variety of smaller plants as well as some rocks to blend everything together. As nice as the towers look, I want them to appear a little bit aged, so I draped some ivy down relatively far off of both of them. At the base of the fake trees, I also added in some relatively large roots that come down crawling over the rocks. This really contrasts well with the greens. I then helped blend in the elephant grass, the mulch, and the regular terrain in with some buffalo grass. It's one of my favorite plants in the game, and I use it in pretty much every build. Now it's really starting to take shape, but I'm not a fan of how you can almost see through it. We need to build up the back, and I fear that there's also not enough ways to get to the main climbing structure, so we should make another smaller one. If we made a smaller climbing structure back here as well, the guest in the gift shop should be able to see the gibbons actually use it. Overall, it was an easy build. We didn't use a single piece that we hadn't used elsewhere. Other than that, I thickened up the foliage in the back of the habitat to prepare for the fence that we're going to add in now. Thankfully, the fence was equally as easy. When placing the European rustic walls on the retaining wall, I was sure to add them in increments of 15-degree angle snaps. This was done intentionally to make adding this fence a lot easier because we can repeat the exact same geometry. For the fence itself, we used the exact same technique we did on the giant Anteater enclosure. We used a very simple combination of mesh and some metal to hold it all together. After the fence focused on safety was complete, I came back to the front where the glass was. It looked a little bit under-detailed compared to the rest of the habitat. All I did was take the exact same wood pieces we used for the entrance of Keystone Wilds and repurpose them to reinforce the glass. The Gibbon habitat's finally complete, and I'm really happy with how it turned out, especially the climbing equipment and the foliage. I think it's some of our best work here on the channel yet. Before the Gibbons come in, however, we're going to have to finish the gift shop. Modular gift shops tend to be a little bit confusing to newer players, but they're actually a lot easier than you'd think. I'll show you, we'll set one up now. Under the Guest tab of the facility, you can filter specifically for only items that are usable in the modular gift shop. I always personally like to start with the shop counter, because where you put your counter and checkout section usually dictates the rest of the gift shop. Thankfully, every single modular gift shop item is flexi-color, so you can make it really match the aesthetic that your gift shop has. The shop counter is actually the easiest part of the modular gift shop, and it's not even close. Every single other piece you can actually put merchandise on, and the guest will come right up to it and purchase it. Spread these pieces all over the gift shop in any way that you choose. They come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes, and with different pieces you can put different merchandise on, so be sure to spread them out and have a variety of different kinds. Keep in mind when building your gift shop, though, that you can only have these modular gift shop expansions on the expansion tiles themselves. If something is outside of the gift shop tiles, guests won't be able to actually interact with it. I like the layout, but an empty gift shop is kind of a cursed image. We're going to have to put some merchandise on these shelves. In order to do that, simply pick one of the shelves that you've already used and click on it. After that, a drop box will appear where it says Items for Sale. You can then pick some merchandise to put on the shelves. It'll come automatically. When I stock my shelves, I try to put similar items right next to each other. For example, this entire wall is dedicated to plushies. Filling up the shelves is a great way to detail the gift shop, and it's functional as well. With the great view right into the Gibbon habitat, plus it being at the start of the zoo, I'm sure this gift shop is going to be really popular upon opening. Speaking of gift shop though, while I detail the rest, I do have an important announcement to make. Throughout the beginning of Keystone Wilds, and especially throughout the later half of Keystone Park, I've always received so many comments of people saying just how attached they feel to these zoos, and that's really touching. My ultimate goal in making these videos, besides being as entertaining as possible, and a little bit informative too, is to make these zoos truly feel like a real place that you can experience. That's why we run the Instagram, the Discord server, the YouTube channel, everything. I want these zoos to feel like a tangible place that you could actually visit in real life one day, but you just have to do it virtually. Well, that changes now. What I mean by this is we've quietly been developing merchandise behind the scenes so you can take a part of Keystone Park or Keystone Wilds home with you. The first wave of Keystone Wilds merchandise is already well into production. I'll show some designs on screen now. Personally, I'm really proud of how they turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. More is going to be revealed in time. It just felt appropriate to drop the teaser during the gift shop build. The interior of this building might be some of the best work we've done between Keystone Park and Keystone Wilds. It looks so sleek, and the lighting effects on the floor make it look so clean. But I think the Gibbons are on their way now. We should probably prepare for their arrival. Before we could officially welcome the Gibbons to the zoo, they wasted no time getting on their climbing equipment. If you have a creative name for either a male or female Lar Gibbon, leave it in the comments below. I love reading through them, and 2 of you will be picked for the next video. The Gibbons' agility was immediately put on display. They're incredibly dexterous animals, and thankfully the climbing structure was perfectly made for them to brachiate. Both of the Gibbons proved immediately curious of their new home, exploring both the ground levels as well as all of their climbing equipment. What was truly astounding is that they even began to start harmonizing their songs, and this is a big deal for Gibbons. Not only is this how they communicate, but if you recall, Gibbons are monogamous. The couples will actually practice these songs together, and it takes years to master. This is another prime example of why we chose the Gibbon to be the premier animal at the start of Keystone Wilds. This is going to be your first impression to the zoo, and they're loud. Adding up their noise, size, and energy, these Gibbons are the absolute perfect starter animal for any zoo, and I highly recommend trying them out for yourselves. I can say with relative confidence, these might be my favorite animals in the game now. They are so much fun to build for and watch. When Keystone Wilds opens to the public, it's going to be really tough to top the first enclosure that you see. Unfortunately, topping this enclosure is going to be a next week problem. I think that's all for today's episode. I really hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know what you think about the exhibit, but as well as the merchandise that I revealed. I really hope you guys enjoyed both. Thanks once again to the members of Club Keystone. You guys truly are the best, and if you'd like to join yourself, the link is in the description. Kingpin out for now. See you guys at Keystone Wilds next week.